Honorable Minister Oneidge Walrond to make her presentation.
No, it's Madam Speaker, I rise to support the motion moved by my colleague, Dr. the Honorable Ashley Singh, Senior Minister in the Office of President responsible for finance and the public service. Mr. Speaker, before I deal with the measures relating to tourism industry and commerce, I would like to lend my perspectives to some of the prevalent criticisms that have been persistently leveled by our colleagues, both in and outside of this honorable house. The first of those, Mrs. Speaker, is raised by the Honorable Member Jai Prasad. I apologize. Is as it relates to, they come here and raise the issue of the increase in the old age pension. And you hear things from the honorable member that preceded me and the members before, that the increase in the old age pension is equivalent to only 5 minutes a day, and that we are an oil-rich country now, and so money's in abundance, we have a surplus of money, and so the pensioners should be given more. Very vacuous, simplistic arguments. And in order to treat with this, Madam Speaker, I find it necessary to restate two fundamental and indisputable facts that seem to be lost in the noise created in this House. The first of these facts, Madam Speaker, is that oil is a finite resource. It is non-renewable. As night follows day, stick with me, there will come a time when it will be gone. It should go without saying that the revenues will disappear with it. So this is the first of the facts that we need to bear in mind, Madam Speaker. The second indisputable fact, Madam Speaker, is that as Guyana went into the historical general elections of 2020, we all knew we possessed massive oil reserves. The Liza 1 discovery was announced in May of 2015, Payara announced in January of 2017, Sunuk in March of that year, Liza 3 and Turbo later on in the same year, and so on. By the time the PPP Civic released its manifesto in January of 2020, Exxon had announced 16 strikes, and all of us now in this honorable house knew or ought to have known that Guyana possessed millions of barrels of oil and oil equivalents. That is the second fundamental fact, Mr. Speaker. We all knew about the oil in January of 2020. I'm going through all of this, Madam Speaker, because our colleagues on the other side are behaving as though neither of these facts is true. One, they behave as though oil resources are infinite, and so they call for all kinds of reckless spending. And when faced with the reality that we are doing exactly what we promised to do with the old age pension, They behave as though the PPPC got into office and then suddenly discovered previously unknown oil revenues. So they say we got a windfall and should therefore program increases over and above what we promised. The reality is, Madam Speaker, that when the PPPC released its manifesto in January 2020, the measures contained in it were carefully considered with full knowledge of what was coming with respect to oil. Our team includes several seasoned veterans of the Ministry of Finance. The President is one such, as is the Vice President, as is the Minister responsible. the money paid to the contractor, and for them, that is the end of the story. And it is the end of the story for them because continuing doesn't suit their narrative. Their narrative being that the infrastructure benefits only the contractor and the contractor is the friend of the government. For the opposition, this contractor doesn't employ people. And for the opposition, those people don't buy food, to use their example, with the money they earn working on infrastructure projects. Neither by the reasoning of the opposition do they buy goods and services in the rest of the economy. And finally, the opposition does not see those roads, bridges, ferries, ports, hospitals, schools, aerodromes, and all the items of infrastructure as providing benefits for Guyanese for decades to come. For them, there is minimal, if any, value in infrastructural projects. So what we have, Madam Speaker, is an opposition that is unwilling to, and perhaps incapable of comprehending the role of infrastructure in economic development. And this is never at the expense of taking care of the needs of the people, Madam Speaker. In fact, the needs of our Guyanese citizens are foremost and paramount when crafting our economic policy. Madam Speaker, were it not for the fact that there are people out there in society who look to the opposition for leadership, I would leave it there. But there are such people, Madam Speaker. That is the nature of a democratic society. There are people who look to the opposition for leadership, and it is my contention, sir, that these people are ill-served by an opposition who oppose for the sake of opposing and do nothing to help or encourage their supporters to seize the opportunities that exist. And these opportunities do exist, Mr. Speaker. This government has made available to all without regard to race, gender, class, or political persuasion. We have heard speaker after speaker on the other side coming to us with tales of woe from people whom they supposedly have met. I wish to suggest to you, sir, that if you're looking to someone for leadership, but that person tells you day in and day out that there is nothing in your country for you, that person tells you that there is no hope for you to get anything unless you put them in power, that it's no use that you bid for a contract or start a business. If that is what you hear from the person to whom you look for leadership, it is not unlikely that this will color the way you see things. Mr. Speaker, there was a quote popularized in the early 20th century by one Napoleon Hill. It said, "Whatever your mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." The opposition is encouraging their supporters to perceive Guyana as having nothing for them. They are the ones, sir, who are oppressing their supporters. They are the ones who wish to confine their supporters, to use the words of the Honorable Member Figueroa. They're the ones who wish to confine their supporters to the working poor by not having them take advantage of all the opportunities of this government. On the other hand, sir, when we travel the length and breadth of this country, wherever we go, we continually encourage Guyanese to seize the opportunities available. We encourage them to start a business, apply for a scholarship, get involved in agriculture, take up part-time jobs, enroll in training programs, apply for a small business grant, apply for a house lot, go for the young professionals home. All of these opportunities and more are available to Guyanese in every town, every village, every region, every community across the length and breadth of this country. We are telling people, especially young people, that this country is a country of bounty, a land of hope and of opportunity. That is why, sir, I can tell you of the dynamic young couple from South Ronville who are growing a logistic company serving both government and private consumers. Or of another enterprising couple from the East Bank of Demerara who are building a marketing company. Or of the barber in Lodge who has just expanded the capacity of his business by 50% with a small business grant which enabled him to outfit another station. Or of the woman in Agricola who has left her job as a domestic worker after she found that she could start a viable business catering meals for the construction workers. on one of those same roads that we can't eat. So, Mr. Speaker, these are people, ordinary people, and I dare say from the dwindling opposition-dominated areas, who refuse to let anyone tell them that there's no place for them in their own country. And because we encourage them to conceive and believe that they are destined for prosperity, they are alive and alert to opportunity and are well on their way to achieving prosperity in the inclusive economy that is being delivered to them by the PPP civic government. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the sectors of tourism, industry, and commerce. As we approach 4 years in office, we are now in a position where we can begin to see some of the impact of the policies we put in place. In this regard, sir, permit me to remind this honorable House of some macro performances of these sectors as reported by my honorable colleague, the Minister responsible for finance. In the realm of industry, other manufacturing grew by 31.8% in 2023. This is by any reading a credible, if not impressive performance. But there is an even more interesting story to be revealed if you refer to Appendix 2 to the budget speech. That appendix shows that other manufacturing grew by 16% during the years 2015 to 2019, but grew by 63% between the years 2020 to 2023. And we like to pay attention to the numbers, Mr. Speaker, because as this old adage goes, the numbers don't lie. The story is similar in the services sector, Mr. Speaker. If we look at the period 2015 to 2019, we can see that the services sector grew 12% in those 5 years. In comparison, the sector grew by 34% during the period 2020 to 2023. In fact, the one-year growth rate for the services sector in 2023 was 12%, almost equal to the 5-year growth rate under their administration. Wholesale and retail trade grew by just over 18% under the stewardship of the coalition government, compared to a growth of 70% since we were returned to office and started implementing our development agenda. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I point out the accommodation and food services subsector, which grew by 13% in 2023. During the period 2015 to 2019, this sector grew by 24%. But during 2020 to 2023, growth was 130%. Mr. Speaker, you may appreciate that this accommodation and food sector is closely related to the tourism sector. So you would appreciate, sir, what a growth of 130% in accommodation and food services implies with respect to growth in tourism. To continue with the sector performances, sir, I wish to again make the point that these developments have not appeared by magic. It should not be too hard to recognize that there's a linkage between, say, expansion in the construction sector and the government's progressive measures, such as providing cement subsidies for homeowners and removal and reduction of taxes on certain building materials. Nor should it be difficult to perceive and understand that there is a linkage between the execution of the PSIP and growth in employment. That the local content legislation has provided a space for our manufacturing and services sector to exhibit these strong growth rates should not be a proposition that invites serious debate. So, Mr. Speaker, as we approach the 4-year mark of our administration, we begin to see the benefits of these strategic measures that we started to implement in 2020, and which we continue to implement in pursuit of a sustainably prosperous future for our people. We are seeing the realization of a vision. Who would have thought in 2020, sir, that today we would have a shore base on reclaimed land in West Demerara, or that we would have a Guyanese company involved in providing cutting-edge subsea engineering services, or that young people will be cultivating broccoli, cauliflower, roses, and other high-value crops. Mr. Speaker, what we are seeing now is the vision of our administration beginning to manifest, and that is where the difference between us and our friends on the other side is starkest. 4 years ago, they could not see what is manifesting today. Just as today, they cannot see what will manifest 4 years or 5 years hence. Mr. Speaker, they think and speak only for today. That is why they will say, you can't eat road. And they will say, pay out the oil money now. Or why 2 years ago, the Honorable Member Hughes could have said in this House that our approach to tourism was pedestrian. They say these things because they operate in the moment. We, on the other hand, are planning and executing based on a development trajectory that extends years and decades into the future. Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, I sat and I listened while the Honorable Member Cathy Hughes boasted about JetBlue saying that this government has brought in no major airlines. What the Honorable Member didn't know then was that even as she was, to use this our Honorable Senior's word, bloviating and grandstanding on the floor of the House, we were quietly in discussions with British Airways. We traveled to London a few weeks thereafter, and by August of 2022, we had announced with British Airways the imminent start of the service. That service has commenced in March of last year and has already transported more than 20,000 passengers on the Ghana-London route. That, sir, is how we work, quietly, with no premature fanfare, but letting the results speak for themselves. Mr. Speaker, with respect to tourism, one of the primary metrics that we pay attention to is visitor arrivals. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member, Mrs. Hughes, speaking outside of this Honorable House, took issue with us over the report that visitor arrivals exceeded 319,000 in the year 2023. The Honorable says that this increase is negligible when compared to 2019. But, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member, the opposition's expert on tourism, totally ignored the fact that in 2020, the world faced the world's most momentous public health challenge it has ever seen in over 100 years in the form of the COVID pandemic. With COVID, the world went into lockdown and international travel ground to a virtual standstill. The World Tourism Organization estimates the global tourism suffered its worst ever year on record, with arrival rates dropping on an average by 74%. Guyana was no exception, sir. So in 2020, in the face of the pandemic, our visitor arrivals plummeted by 73% to 86,000. Mr. Speaker, that really is the base that we're looking at. If we consider the effect of the pandemic then, we might be able to appreciate the magnitude of our achievement as regards visitor arrivals. Arrivals increased in 2021 by 83% over 2020, moving from 86,000 to 158,000 over that period. In the following year, that is 2022, arrivals increased by 82% to 288,000. And last year, 2023, we returned to just over pandemic levels with the arrivals of 319,000. This is the record with which the Honorable Member takes issue. Mr. Speaker, when looked at in the context of our recovery from the pandemic, visitor arrivals increased by close to 270% in the 3 years we took office. In fact, we were in the upper half of the league tables in the Caribbean as regards rate of recovery as at the end of 2022, and we were well over the world average in the year before. Once again, Mr. Speaker, this recovery did not happen by accident. It didn't happen just naturally and with the effluxion of time. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that in the early days of the pandemic, one of the measures that we took was to procure safe vaccines from wherever we could get them. Our intention was to get our population as close as we could to full vaccination so we could safely reopen. Were it not for the courage and resolve on the part of our administration to defy the geopolitics and to place paramount the interests of our citizens, our country could not have recovered as rapidly and as robustly as it did from the pandemic. And that recovery includes the 270% growth in visitor arrivals that we have recorded over the period 2020 to 2023. Mr. Speaker, arrivals for 2023 surpassed the previous highest recorded in 2029 by about 5,000 persons. Notwithstanding that modest amount, the fact is that arrivals reached a record-breaking total of 356,000, which stands as Guyana's highest recorded number of visitors to date. In fact, 2023 was a record-breaking year, with 5 months of that year seeing the highest arrivals on record, those months being March, April, July, September, and November. I would note that the Cricket Carnival, coupled with the finals of the CPL, with which we worked hard on securing the rights for, boosted arrivals in the month of September in each year that it was held. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member, Cathy Hughes, speaking outside of this Honourable House, also asserted, earnestly and with considerable confidence, that the increase in visitor arrivals was mainly attributed to the oil and gas sector. Now, Mr. Speaker, I don't know where the Honourable Member gets her information from, but the reports I received from the Guyana Tourism Authority paint a far different picture. Mr. Speaker, for the year 2022, business visitors numbered 47,000, while those coming for holiday and leisure numbered 143,000. For 2023, business travelers numbered just over 53,000, while those arriving for holiday and leisure travel numbered 177,000. In both cases, sir, people who indicated that they came to Guyana for holiday were almost triple those who reported being here for business-related travel, which of course we would associate with oil and gas. In fact, if we add in those who indicated that they came to see friends and relatives, then the numbers are on the order of 4 times those business visitors who, once again, we would associate with the oil and gas sector. Mr. Speaker, the number of people coming here on business grew just over 12% from 2022 to 2023, while the number of people visiting on holiday grew 23%. For good measure, I might add that those coming for meetings and conferences grew by almost 30% from 2022 to 2023. The growth in this last category reflects a deliberate strategy of our government to bring meetings, conferences, exhibitions, and the like events to Guyana, and the numbers speak for themselves. This, Mr. Speaker, is what we mean in the theme of the budget when we say we are staying the course. We could have been distracted by the naysayers who could not, or rather would not, see the vision. Instead, we buckled down, did the work, and now we will let that work and the results do the talking. Mr. Speaker, we continue to promote Guyana's tourism product on the international stage. In 2023, Guyana's submission placed 3rd in the Caribbean Tourism Organization Sustainable Tourism Awards for tourism education and training. Carnambu Lodge was featured among the Green Destination Top 100 worldwide in the ITB Berlin Awards. Our tourism product has been featured in prominent international publications including Forbes, The Times, Telegraph, Daily Mail, and Worldly Adventurer. Guyana was also ranked number 13 out of 35 best destinations for 2023 and beyond by National Geographic. Mr. Speaker, we continue to work on infrastructure to support the tourism sector. Of course, one of the critical areas in which we have concentrated our effort is airlift capacity. Last year, we welcomed British Airways serving the Guyana route with direct flight to London. They joined the Inter-Caribbean, which commenced operations in 2022, and JetBlue Airways, which started in December 2021. My colleagues have informed the House that American Airlines will add another daily flight on the Georgetown-Miami route, while United will be introducing a Georgetown-Houston route with 4 flights weekly in 2024. Regionally, Suriname Airlines added a service linking Georgetown to Bridgeton, Barbados, and Paramaribo. And Inter-Caribbean has publicly signaled a desire to expand its operations into Ogo. Mr. Speaker, we now have several direct flights a day to the regional hubs of Barbados, Trinidad, or St. Lucia, from where our passengers can connect to major destinations in Europe, North America, and the Caribbean. We also have at least 2, and some days 3 direct flights daily into major North American hubs of Miami and New York. We have, of course, a direct route to London operating twice weekly and flights to Panama City. And with the addition of the Georgetown-Houston route, Guyana will have one-stop connections to somewhere between 250 and 300 destinations worldwide. In all, Mr. Speaker, Airlift capacity rose from 226,000 seats in 2021 to just over 1 million in 2022, and again to 1.2 million seats in 2023. In short, sir, we have doubled airlift capacity in these 3 years. We have seen overall arrivals increase from 844,000 to 937,000 between 2019 and 2023. In so doing, we rebounded from a low of 231,000 in 2020 when we were caught by the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, I say once again that these various developments have not come by chance. They have come because we have a vision and we are putting in the work to realize it day in and day out.
Honorable member, time out. We need an extension for you to conclude.
Oh.
Mr. Speaker, may the honorable member and colleague have 5 minutes or more to conclude. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, you have 5 minutes to conclude.
Sir, still on tourism, we have moved rapidly at the beginning of our term as we have invited expression of interest for the construction of internationally branded hotels. Our intention was to add about 1,200 rooms to the stock of higher tier rooms by 2025. And we are pleased to report that we are on track to have that target met on schedule. The developers of 5 internationally branded hotels expect to complete construction and start operations this year. I would point out, sir, that alongside this push to bring internationally branded hotels to Guyana, we are also facilitating the emergence of local facilities. One example of such is the Guyana First Urban Eco Lodge at Diamond, where some 28 lodges have been built on 2 acres of land in close proximity to the Providence Stadium. The entire property will be owned by women, and this company has been registered and shares are available for purchase. Mr. Speaker, I'm turning to commerce and industry in the interest of time. I'm pleased to report that our business processing outsourcing initiatives in 2023, we have completed rehabilitation works on the Enmore and Tucson call centers, and as a result, in 2024, 300 individuals will now benefit from employment opportunities in those facilities. Further, 4 new call centers were constructed in 2023 in Regions 2 and Region 6, and this expansion will facilitate up to 1,600 new jobs. I will move to small business support. In the last year budget, Mr. Speaker, we added $300 million into the Small Business Development Fund, with which 1,500 small business owners benefit from access to grant financing. Looking ahead to 2024, our proposed budget underscores government's commitment to the small business community, evidenced by the replenishment of the fund with an additional $450 million for support to the sector. Going forward, we plan to emphasize and expand our support measures for small businesses. One such measure is training and development, which we intend to deliver up to 300 small business owners or operators in some priority sectors. Our aim is to maximize the sustainability of the sector by giving small business owners the tools by which they can build sustainable and resilient businesses. Mr. Speaker, this year we intend to bring to the House the Security Interest in Movable Property Bill. One of the principal objectives of this bill is to enable small business owners to collateralize movable property so as to gain access to finance. So for example, a small business owner could move more readily to use, let's say, an excavator or other piece of machinery as collateral for a loan. Turning to our modernization of the business environment, work on the electronic single windows for trade is in its advanced stages. It is projected to go live in just a few weeks in March of this year. The electronic single window for trade will to a large extent automate the process for clearing of items for import and export, thus delivering a substantial decrease in the time and expenses associated with the trade-related process. Mr. Speaker, the fact that the first phase of operation of the single window is but a few weeks away again underscores the point that as we move into the year 4 of this administration, we are beginning to see results. Whether it be the single windows or the visitor arrivals or the hotel completions or the operational call centers or the business incubators or the house lot distributions, these results stem from vision, foresight, industry, and the tenacity to stay the course. Mr. Speaker, our approach has proven itself through the results. That is why I support Budget 2024 and urge this entire Honorable House to do likewise.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Oneidge Walrond, Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce.